J.D. Carroll, I'm excited to talk first about firearms and all the misinformation people are constantly getting, especially from the major media.
There's a lot of misinformation out there, Mark.
Let's just hit a few of the big ones. I mean, one is the big thing of magazine versus
A clip.
a clip.
Yes, most firearms we have today and the general public have magazines, not clips. Clips are used in some of the old guns where there's a stripper clip used to push the bullets down into an internal magazine, but magazine is what holds the bullets internally and feeds them into the chamber of the gun.
Yeah, what are some of the other misinformations that we can count on by the media?
Well, the federal government only controls firearm sales between licensed dealers and licensed dealers in the public. So they don't actually regulate the sale or transfer of firearms amongst private individuals. That's up to the individual state.
Another one is you can just walk out anywhere and get a gun.
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. To go out and get a gun, there's actually a pretty lengthy process. Of course, again, the federal government doesn't regulate the sale of firearms between private individuals, but if you have a friend or family member that has a firearm and you want to get that from them, you got to follow the state laws. And of course, the federal laws do apply to private individual sales when you're dealing with somebody that's a convicted felon or who legally cannot possess or own a firearm.
The big thing is, you go to a gun show and you easily buy a gun. No, you got paperwork you have to fill out. And I just want to also add, every single time someone buys a firearm, at least in North Carolina, they have to fill out a sheet that you will do everything to keep them safe from children and minors.
And the news media is constantly bad-mouthing gun shows, making it seem like anybody can go to a gun show and get a firearm and they can avoid, they call it the gun show loophole. There is no loophole in gun shows.
No.
You go to a gun show to get a firearm, everybody that's selling firearms from a table or booth at a gun show has to be a federally licensed dealer and abide by all federally licensing rules to transfer that firearm. Are there people that can come in with their own firearms and walk around and try to sell that firearm or try to trade it? Absolutely. But to buy a firearm at a gun show, you still have to have all of the proper ID and background checks.
Yeah, and if they don't do it correctly, because every firearm someone has, they're called to have an FFL license.
Absolutely.
They're accountable for everyone they sold. So if it's 5 years down the line and something happens, that falls back on them. So any legitimate persons that's selling is going to cover their you-know-what.
Absolutely. There is a place on the Form 4473, which is the federal form that a licensed dealer has to fill out every time they transfer a firearm. If they transfer the firearm at the gun show, there is a place on that form that they have to indicate that it was done at a gun show, where the gun show was, the date and time, and everything. You know, the news media will tell you that there are unlicensed dealers selling firearms at the gun show or set up at the gun show. They may not say selling firearms, but they make it sound like that. Sure, there are a lot of booths at a gun show that do not have federally licensed dealers at them, but they're also not selling firearms. They're selling knickknacks and
or a little stun flashlight or something, or mace.
Exactly.
Or something. Yeah. So. The other thing is that they're constantly working to divide people instead of educate them.
Absolutely.
Because if they actually gave a darn about any of this, they'd realize that firearm safety is the most important thing a parent could focus on. Getting their child have firearm safety and getting it themselves. So they move from either fascination or just fear to respect.
Absolutely. The best thing any family can do that has young children is teach them firearm safety. Even if that family doesn't believe in firearms and doesn't want to have them, that child is going to be exposed to firearms at some point in their life. They're going to see it on TV. They're going to see it in cartoons. They're going to see it in video games. Teach them the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety and to respect the power of the firearm.
And we're going to cover that today.
Absolutely.
And the thing that got my attention years ago is my martial arts instructor. And he said, how many police officers' children have you heard of being shot? Think of it.
Wow,
all the cops, right? All the cops. And he says, you know why? Because that cop's going to take his kids out front. He's going to show them safety. He's going to show them how it destroyed something and how to respect the firearm.
Absolutely.
And that, I'll never forget that. And I went, any parent think they're responsible by not getting it in our culture. They're not.
Absolutely. I, as you know, am a retired deputy sheriff.
Yep.
My children learned firearm safety from the time they were old enough to pick it up off the table. If I inadvertently left it laying somewhere and my kids were toddlers, they wouldn't touch it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
absolutely. Another big lie that the news media tells us or wants us to believe is that the guns are the bad thing.
Right.
The guns are evil. The guns hurt people. That's simply not true.
Yeah.
People are the bad people.
Yeah.
What makes a criminal a criminal?
Right.
The fact that they don't obey the law. See, the agenda is to make Americans think that if we have more gun control laws, which limit the ability to get firearms, that people are going to be safer.
Yes.
Martin, they can make all the laws they want. Criminals are criminals. They're going to get the guns regardless of what the law says. That's why they're a criminal, because they don't care about the law. So all of these laws do is hurt the good people and make it hard for us to protect ourselves and our family.
There was a small business that said, "Oh, I'm going to get one of those no gun sign at the front."
No concealed carry.
And you know, I told him, I said, "You know what that says? That says if you're a criminal and you're armed, come here first."
On in.
Because you can guarantee no honest citizen who's earned the right to have a concealed carry is going to just walk in there and trust. He's just going to take his business somewhere else.
Absolutely. If I was a criminal, I would target any store where I could think I could get some quick cash or lots of cash.
With a little sign.
That if they had that sign, because that tells me that the law-abiding citizens are not going to be armed and I'm safe. That's safe hunting
And
grounds.
they won't spend their money there, too, because they'll go, you don't understand what's going on, and you only care of that. Yeah.
When I teach the concealed carry class, I tell my students, if you do business at a place that has that no concealed carry sign on it, you're a fool.
Yeah.
You know? So that's my personal opinion, and that's what I teach.
Yeah. Tell people a little bit about your background, then we're going to go into great detail about everything you need to know if you're considering a firearm, because I don't know about you. I'm not an advocate. Everyone should have it. I'm not an advocate that it's right for everyone. I am an advocate. Everyone should know firearm safety.
I understand that completely.
Tell your background.
So I served in the United States Marine Corps out of high school. I used to joke that because I was in shooting competition all my life, that I joined the Marine Corps and went there and taught them how to shoot. But of course, we know that's not true. But so at any rate, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I got into civilian law enforcement. I retired from a local sheriff's department here in North Carolina. My stepfather, who passed away, owned a pest control company, so I took over that pest control company. But I also took a job with the State Highway Patrol shortly thereafter. So at any rate, I have a lot of law enforcement background. I was a instructor in law enforcement. Taught general instruction in explosives and hazardous materials. I am also a firearms instructor, certified with the state of North Carolina and certified through the National Rifle Association, the NRA. I'm also a certified North Carolina concealed carry handgun instructor. Teach those classes. So shooting has been in my life. Matter of fact, the first time I ever went shooting with my dad, he carried me in a bassinet down the railroad tracks and went groundhog hunting. So if you can picture how not happy my mother was when she found out that he took this little baby in diapers groundhog hunting. But at any rate, I love the sport of firearms. I grew up shooting in IPSC, IDPA, and practical pistol combat course firearms competitions. My father ran a 22 silhouette league. We'd have chickens, pigs, turkeys, and rams. So 25, 50, 75, and 100 yards. You had 10 chickens, 10 pigs.
Yeah, and these weren't real chicken pigs.
No, these are metal silhouettes.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'd have 10 bullets in your 22, and you would shoot one bullet at each target, and then you'd move to the 50, the 75, and the 100. And however many you knock down out of each set, you got a score. And at the end of the, I don't remember how long the competition was, a few months or whatever, but at the end of it, there were plaques and awards given out. Cool. And it really was a shooting sport.
Yeah.
And that is one of the best things that this country has lost sight of, is that the sport of shooting.
Yeah.
The combat courses, there was a timer, the buzzer would go off, and you had to fire, sets of rounds. So 2 at this target, 2 at this target, 3 at this target, 1 at this target, and you had to either hit the target or miss. And then your speed of firing plus your score of where the bullet hit was then calculated into an overall score. And that was a big thing that we did. And we had moving targets. I remember my father, when I was a teenager, I used to ride skateboards. My father took my skateboard, took the wheels off of my actual board and put them onto a target stand. And then you would shoot a steel silhouette it would fall over and pull a pin, and then the wheels of my skateboard would start to move with a target, and it would go between good guys.
I say,
And you had to try to shoot it between the good guy targets. And just, it was fun, reactive shooting.
Yeah. As I said, I learned about this later in life. And it was my friend Dave. He said, I'll never forget it. He said, "You're so stressed taking care of your parents, you need to relax and go to the range." Now, remember, I was raised in Washington, D.C. Okay. So, and oh my God, it's all evil and everything else. And I went, well, I'll try something, because I had no break from the constant mental, worrying about a parent.
Sure, absolutely.
And so we go to the range. He says, "First of all, I'm going to show you safety before we go in, fundamental safety. Follow my instruction, do this, and you should have two things in your head." He said, the target, what's going on in front of you, and safety. And there should be nothing else. And I'll tell you, there was nothing else. And for an hour, it's hard to describe if you haven't experienced. I had the most peaceful experience, because of course you have the headphones, because there was no room for daydreaming, worrying,
anything but what
you need to be present.
It's much easier, and I'm sure your friend knew this.
No.
It's much easier as an instructor, to teach somebody how to shoot who has very little or no shooting experience.
Yeah.
When I have my concealed carry classes, I'll always ask, raise your hand if you shoot all the time, if you've been shooting a long time. Raise your hand if you've shot a couple of times but not often. Raise your hand if you've never shot before. Again, the ones who have never shot before and the ones who have only shot very seldom are so much easier to teach, because they don't have years and years and years of bad habits that you have to try to overcome.
Right.
So I wish there was a time, and I think when my father was in school, they taught firearm safety.
Yeah, which I think they should.
I think they
now that I know.
should.
Oh my God, nothing's more safer than doing that. But we've got to demonize everything and keep everyone separated.
Absolutely.
Years ago, there's no money in not doing that.
Years ago, I don't remember when it was, but it was 60 or 2020. There was one of those news line people that did an experiment, and they had, I don't remember exactly the details, but let's say they had 10 children. 5 children came from homes that had guns, and 5 children came from homes where they weren't, right? And the 5 that had guns, they had to have taught gun safety, and the children had to know and understand it. And the other 5, the gun safety was, we just didn't talk about it. We don't have them in the home.
Yeah, we don't talk.
And
it's bad. It's evil.
All of the kids who came from homes where gun safety was, don't have them, don't talk about them. The toy gun that was in the room with the other toys, the kids picked up the gun and played with it. And they didn't just play with it like a hammer or whatever. Right. They picked it up and held it like a firearm is supposed to be. And you're talking about 5 or 6-year-old kids. And the parents were dumbfounded. They didn't understand how their children knew how to actually hold a gun and point it at another kid and act like they were shooting. Right. Again, you see it in the cartoons. Right. You see it on the TV. The 5 kids who came from
families where they knew safety.
4 of them didn't touch it. One of them that did touch it picked it up. And the key to it was she picked it up in a safe manner.
Right.
Kept it pointed away, kept her finger off the trigger, and took it away and moved it from the other toys.
Yeah.
So that's just amazing.
That's volumes. Why don't we move into what are the fundamentals of firearm safety?
Sure. So there are 4 basic safe gun handling fundamentals that everybody should know and practice. And when I say practice, I mean physically practicing these safety fundamentals. All right. And I like to do these in order because I feel like each one is redundant to the other. Okay. So the very first rule to safe gun handling is treat every gun as if it is loaded. Put it in your head that every firearm you pick up is loaded. Even when you have unloaded it, when you have cleared it, when you have checked the chamber, physically and visually inspected it, when you have checked the magazine, physically and visually inspected it, and you know there is not a round in that gun, you still treat it as if it is loaded because you are training your mind, that muscle memory, to do that in case you pick up a gun one day and forget to clear it.
I want to add something because John Z, that, I helped with the zombie shooters.
Yes.
And he was really my mentor with it. He said, if you set down that firearm and you go talk and you turn around and pick it up, what do? Check it again. And really, and like I set one down once and I picked up because what you going to do? Check it. And he really drilled so that it's like, it's sort of like if you pick up a pin, you check it. Now, if I were picking up as a firearm, even then, I'd pick it up like this because it's pointing that direction. You know, and I would then check it. Okay, let's see. Is it, loaded? And you go through the process and knowing. And he showed me you take the time to inspect every single time. And he goes, if anyone's not doing that, they're dangerous. Stop them. I like the idea. You'll learn later, we're all range officers, is what he said all the time.
We have a responsibility to keep them and ourselves safe. Yeah.
So that's the begin thing. And the other thing I think is related to this that we'll get into is just this one phrase he said is, you're responsible for every bullet that ever leaves your firearm.
Yes, and our buddy Mike Copeland.
It's another guy.
He likes to say every bullet has a lawyer attached to it.
Right, so, that's a good one. That's a good one too.
It doesn't matter where it goes and what it hits.
Yeah,
if it's the wrong thing, there's a lawyer attached to that bullet. So.
And if it's the right thing, you probably should have insurance anyway.
Oh, I agree. Right. So, but
go ahead. Number one.
But you were correct. Treat every gun as if it's loaded, and when you pick it up and check it again. That might sound to a seasoned shooter, to somebody like myself, who is responsible with firearms. That might seem ridiculous to if I sat it down, turned away, and I come back and pick it up to check it again. But what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're teaching your brain that every single time you pick up a gun, check it and make sure it's unloaded.
Yeah.
It'll literally be as muscle memory.
I want to tell a story of where I made a mistake. I had a lamp down, though, I was going to cut up and throw away. And, I disconnected it and was breaking it down. And I took pliers to cut it. Well, what did I not check? It wasn't plugged in. And it was just like the
same thing. Absolutely.
There was a pop. And I went,
Yep,
this is kind of like the firearm thing.
Absolutely.
Luckily, if it were a firearm, I would have probably double checked it.
The same is also true the other direction, Martin.
Yeah.
What if that gun is your home defense firearm? Right. And you were cleaning it.
Yeah.
And then you go put it back to wherever you keep it in case you have to get to it in an emergency. Yeah. You also want to check it when you put it there. Check it every now and again to make sure it's loaded.
Yeah.
Because an unloaded firearm in an emergency is no good.
It's called a rock.
Right. Wait, so
so that's number one.
That's number one. Every gun is always loaded.
Pay attention.
Number two. So, and again, I like these in a certain order.
Yeah,
right?
I'm with you.
If you forget to treat the gun as if it's loaded, rule number two is keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Okay?
Yes.
So you pick up the firearm, you forget to see if it's unloaded. If you pick it up and you keep your finger off of the trigger, right? Most people, when they pick up a firearm, that finger goes right to the trigger. Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and you are going to fire. If you forget rule number one, but you remember rule number two, so you haven't treated it like it's loaded. You're sweeping the room with it, but your finger's off the trigger. Nobody's going to accidentally get shot.
Right.
So,
and we know of someone in Hollywood who never had firearm instruction
and killed somebody and hit two people
with bullet and claimed, well, they didn't tell me. Well, if they had fundamental firearm instruction, that should have been where they threw the book at them 12 times over.
Absolutely.
If he had fundamental, that would have never happened. That would have never happened. He would have not had that on it no matter what. And we all know enough, just so you know, something else was going on.
And when that happened, I thought about, I wish they would hire me to be the guy who's in charge of firearms at movie sets.
Yeah, right.
Right? Because not only would I make the firearm safe, but everybody who's going to be in that room is going to go through a quick class on firearm safety.
That's it.
So
that's excellent. So that's number two.
Number two. All right. So
that's good.
Keep your finger off the trigger. Number three is don't point your firearm at anything you're not willing to shoot or destroy.
Right.
To kill or destroy.
Right.
What I like to say is keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction. So what is a safe direction? And again, I teach this in my class. Generally, there are two safe directions, right?
Right.
Down or down range. So I teach my students, down is easy. Just point it down. Yeah. You're pointing it down at the ground or you're pointing it down range. Down range doesn't necessarily mean at a shooting range with a backstop.
Right.
If you're in a shooting situation and there's a bad guy down there, that's down range.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which brings us to rule number 4.
Yeah.
Be sure of your target what's around it and behind it.
Yeah.
If you have to get in a situation where you have to shoot at somebody or something, you want to be sure that there's not something behind it or around it that you might accidentally hit.
One way that was described to me by John, I kind of liked it. We'll use our pen
Pencil,
right here.
right?
One thing that I liked about that he described is he says, imagine there's a laser that can cut through walls coming out of the tip.
Absolutely.
And think through everything of where it's going.
What it might
You know,
hit.
wherever you're going. And so even when you're panning down in the household, could there be someone downstairs? Where is it going? How am I moving it to a different location? And always keeping that in mind.
Absolutely.
And that's true on the range too, because, you know, the notorious story is somebody has a little range in there going for the little top shot and it goes right to the ceiling because they haven't paid attention.
That's exactly right. We have seen indoor ranges. We've seen marks on the ceiling. There's a misconception about when we say point the gun in a safe direction. I will see people moving from station to station or just carrying their firearms up here.
All
right.
Charlie Angel's idiot.
That's exactly right. Charlie's Angels, the Sabrina pose, right? So why is that not a safe direction, Martin?
Because there could be someone upstairs. It could ricochet, all that.
If you fire a round up,
it's coming down.
It's coming down, especially if you're outside and there's nothing for it to hit.
Right.
That bullet can do just as much damage at terminal velocity coming down as it can just being shot directly at somebody. But yeah, so if you live in a house with a second floor, could be somebody above you. If you live in an apartment and you're not on the top floor, could be somebody above you. And that's also why I say generally down is in a safe direction. But let's say you live on the second or third floor of an apartment building, or you're upstairs in a 2-story house and you're pointing it down, that could be not a safe direction, because if you fire around and it doesn't get stopped in the floor, it could hit somebody. So you just got to be mindful of that.
It's just thinking that away. And those are the fundamentals that everyone should know. And I think it just needs to be practiced all the time.
It should be taught, even if they don't want to bring firearm teaching back to school. They should teach that.
At least those 4. I guarantee we'd have less problems.
Absolutely. Mike likes to say it's the 4 cardinal rules. And what is something that's cardinal? That means shall not be broken, right? So absolutely.
So that's a good one. Now I want to move on to a conversation about someone's trying to decide if they should get a firearm or not. And I want to share my story, because after I was in my very early 20s when my martial arts instructor did a demo, and they had a revolver and did some demos and so forth. And he said, don't get this for protection unless you're willing to face the consequence of taking a life. And you know what, JD, at the moment, I said, I'm not mature enough for this.
Right.
I'm not ready. And I really feel good. That was a good decision.
Absolutely.
I didn't go, that's cool.
But somebody gave you good advice and made you think.
Yeah. The quote I got was, your life is going to be over if you take a life no matter what, because you will never, you're just not, it's something. And you've been a veteran. I know many veterans. I grew up in DC meeting them. It's clearly nobody wants to take a life that has a sane thing. So it's going to only be that case where there's absolutely no other option. So that's what I want to talk about. I'm not an advocate. Everyone should do it. But if they do it, they need to get education. They need to understand it's a perishable skill. So if you just get it, you put it on the shelf, you might as well just, I don't know, have a dangerous rock in the corner or something.
Right.
And so I want to move into that, what they should consider before they consider having a firearm really for personal safety.
Sure. So one of the things that I really like to start with, as you know, I'm a federally licensed dealer.
Yeah.
So I trade in firearms, and I teach the concealed carry. I teach a basic handgun for women.
Oh, a lot of great training. You'll get all that.
Yeah. So, but with that comes, why should you buy a firearm?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? So I have a few things that I focus on.
Good.
All right. Do you want it for personal protection?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that you need it? Do you do things? Do you go places that you're likely to be involved in a situation where you need it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you do sport shooting? All right. Mm-hmm. Sport shooting would be like I was talking about before, where you shoot in those move and shoot, you're gaining points, you're trying to, those sports.
Mhm.
Do you need to hunt? Are you going to start hunting? Have you
Right.
been hunting? Did you used to hunt? You want to get back into it? That sort of thing. Are you trying to defend your home? Do you live in an area where break-ins are common? We know that most time when somebody burglarizes a home, if they accidentally catch somebody in the house, that person more often than not ends up murdered.
Yeah.
Right. So is it home protection?
You mean
Personal
they don't
protection?
wait 20 minutes for the 911 to show up? They don't.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. They
Isn't that
don't
amazing?
say, "Sir,
You know?
this is a gun-free zone."
Isn't that
And
something
I'm
else
at
the
home,
news media
and I
wants us to
called
think?
the police. Could you wait until they show up?
Sure.
Right?
You know,
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Didn't
on
you see my
TV
new
that-
firearm
Yeah.
sticker
Right.
on the door?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
Sorry. Yeah.
You know? No, that's all right. You're talking about the no concealed carry
Yeah.
signs on restaurants
Yeah,
or stores and stuff. Okay, when those companies, those businesses put that sign up,
Yeah.
they become legally responsible for your safety.
Yeah.
How many clerks behind the counter do you think are going to jump over the counter and get between you and a bad guy with a gun?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
not going to happen. But yeah, it's amazing. So at any rate, what's your reason for having it? If your reason for having it is sport shooting, you might want to look at a different type of gun than if your reason for having it is concealed carry. Right?
Yeah.
If you're going to do sport shooting, you might want a larger firearm, gives you a little,
or like a 22 that's a target one.
right? Absolutely. Versus something that you want to try to conceal on your body that will still give you the knockdown power that you need to stop a bad guy.
Yep. We've got competitive shooting, target shooting, and hunting, and then personal protection.
Sure. Personal protection or home protection.
Or home protection. Now I want to go into, if you're going to consider getting a firearm, what you should do. Let's just take personal protection. And we'll start with home protection, and then we'll move into, what does concealed carry mean, at least in North Carolina, and so forth. So they at least understand it. Because I got to tell you, one of the things I loved about taking the concealed carry, and I've gotten to help him out with his courses before, is what I say is first learning how to not scare a cop. That was what I said,
Yes.
And I learned stuff in just the concealed carry. I'm going, why didn't I do that my whole life when I was pulled over for a speeding ticket?
Sure.
So, because, I want police officers to feel safe when I'm on the road. Because
one of the advantages of taking a concealed carry class from a law enforcement officer,
like you,
or former law enforcement officer, is that we can give you the perspective of a police officer walking up to your car.
Yeah. So let's talk about if you're considering getting one, just beginning, where should you begin? Because,
that's an excellent question.
Yeah.
What I always ask a potential customer that calls me or reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I've been looking at firearms and I've been thinking about getting one with the things that are going today." I say, "Well, what types of firearms have you shot or have you held in your hand?" So, well, I haven't, but I've been looking online, and that's the problem. People buy firearms, what they've seen online. They say, "Oh, this is pretty, this is neat." And they'll order the firearm, and then 3 weeks later, they'll call me back and say, "This one just doesn't feel good in my hand." So my number one rule, even if you're a seasoned shooter and you've been shooting your whole life, before you buy a new firearm, go somewhere where you can hold that firearm and preferably test fire it.
Right.
See if you like the recoil.
Yep.
A certain firearm manufacturer came out with a firearm that was geared towards ladies, and might have even had the word lady in its name.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and the recoil on it was so bad that ladies did not enjoy shooting.
I've shot one of those, and they're really painful.
Lady,
what the hell?
It's not good, right?
No.
And so if you don't shoot that, but yet it seems to have been marketed towards you, you buy it, and then you're all upset, right?
Yeah.
Now you got to try to sell it and get something that does work for you.
And I'll add something to it, because firearms are not like you buy something from Amazon, you return it, because that serial number is marked with the person who bought it.
That's correct.
And that always stays as a stamp there. So you don't want to go around and go, well, if I buy it and don't like it, I'll switch it out. No, you want to be thinking things through, because there is a tracking, again, the media not telling anyone. There's a tracking that occurs with each one of these things to human beings.
That's correct.
If I buy it and then I sell it, well, there's still an audit trail. It came through me. So I think it's so important to take your time and start. And like you said, go work with someone. You work with people one-on-one with them if they're getting them, but that's more I call boutique. That's where there are already people
Sure.
you've trained and work with. But if you go to there are a lot of good gun stores, see if they're comfortable. And you know what I have to say is, if you're one of the stereotypes is some of the gun stores in the past weren't as good with women. Try several out.
Absolutely.
If you're comfortable with it. In fact, Michael now works at one.
He
right?
does. Yep.
You know,
absolutely.
I'd send any woman to him to take. But
so the
start
thing
with
about that is, if you buy a firearm based on look or based on what your friend told you they liked or whatever, and then you go fire it and you just don't like it, do you think you're going to spend much time training with it and being proficient with it?
No.
Do you think you might still carry it on your side?
I hope not.
Well, you would hope not, exactly. But the reason you say I would hope not is because a lot of them would.
Yeah.
And then in a bad situation, when they grab it to try to defend themselves, are they going to be good with it? Absolutely not.
No, because they're under maximum stress.
Maximum stress, and your body's going to do what it trained the most or what it trained to last.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you haven't taught yourself that muscle memory, you're not going to be good with it. The last thing you remember about that gun is you didn't like the recoil.
Yeah.
So you might be that person who grabs it in a high stress situation and goes,
yeah, right.
You know, because you're afraid of the recoil.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, I want to tell a story I heard about police officers with revolvers. They used to, one group was training them, and what they do is after they shot, they said, get the brass out and put it in your pocket so it's not lost.
That's correct.
And what they found is dead cops, because they took so long to do that, they didn't reload in time.
That's correct.
And they were dead with the shells in their pocket because that muscle memory.
That was here in North Carolina. It was a trooper. It was two troopers. And they got in a shootout with their revolvers, and they were dumping the brass in their hand, putting it in their pocket, reloading. The bad guy who was shooting at them, he realized that after every so often, there was a long pause. So he literally, while the troopers were reloading, he walked up and shot him in the head.
Oh my God! So
so they changed their training. The training then went to dump it on the ground and reload as fast as you can and get back in the gunfight.
Yeah. That's the thing. And like you said, the best is if you can go to a range where you can rent one. You know, tell them I'm a new shooter. They always ask when you do it. Now, you're going to have to fill out paperwork there, too.
Sure, absolutely.
Because, again, you can't just go to a gun range like the media is going to let you thing. And
if you're a felon, they're not going to just let you come in and rent the gun and go out on their range and shoot. Right?
They're screening for felony. They're screening for mental disorder.
Sure.
Because the gun ranges want it safe for them, and they don't want a bad story.
Absolutely. Talking about the mental disorder, that's something else that's really big with the news media.
Oh, of course.
You know, we being the pro Second Amendment type, you know, we say that we need more mental health. What has this country and this state especially done? They've started shutting down all the mental health facilities.
Even in Raleigh, Dorothea Dix.
Dorothea Dix is the one I'm thinking of, absolutely. And it's harder and harder and harder for people to get mental health.
Yeah.
Right? Mental health help. The mental health aspect of it is now, in order to get that firearm, you have to sign, or to get your concealed carry permit, you have to sign a release of mental health records. Yeah. Now, a lot of people think that means that the sheriff's office is going to get all of your medical records and know everything about you, and that HIPAA violation thing comes in, and that's not how that works. You sign that release of medical information, and then the sheriff's office sends that off to whoever controls the information amongst all of the medical facilities. And if there is something in your medical history that would disqualify you from having or possessing a firearm, that mental health facility or that medical facility is supposed to notify the sheriff's office. They don't just carte blanche send your medical file to whoever's requesting it. So
excellent. So now we're talking about deciding on your first firearm, and I want to talk about two different mainly popular ones, and that would be a revolver versus a semi-automatic. And I'm going to take a moment and get our blue guns out.
Absolutely.
So we can show something. And there we go. So we have these blue firearms, and I'm picking them up. Notice you can see this. and we're tilted to occur. But I'm going to even pick this up knowing I know what's on the other side of that wall. There's a room in my home studio, and then there's dirt and so forth. So I'm thinking all the way through that wall, even picking this one up. This is called a semi-automatic. We have two little sizes. Here's another one. And then this is called a revolver. So I'll let you kind of talk about the difference and then pick them up as you think are relevant.
A revolver is a firearm that has a cylinder in it that can hold bullets. Most of the time it has 5, but you have some 6 shots, some 22 revolvers. You can put 9 or 10 rounds in, but they spin. So the cylinder revolves around. It does not automatically eject a cartridge and put a new cartridge into the chamber. It's a set system, all right? And so that's why it's called a revolver. They are harder to reload as far as speed is concerned because you don't get a bunch of cylinders and just slap the cylinder in. You have to empty the brass out of the cylinder, put the brass in, as we were just talking with the troopers. And so it takes a little more time. They do have what are called speed loaders, little devices that hold the bullets, and it's got a little thumb knob on it. You put it in there, turn the thumb knob, it releases the bullets into the cylinder, close the cylinder, you're ready to fire again. But this is that revolver as you were talking about. No difference on the gun safety. Treat this firearm as if it's loaded. This is a replica of a gun. You and I know that it's rubber.
Busted,
it's
but it's rubber.
Impossible to fire anything out of it. But we treat it as if it's a gun and as if it's loaded, which means we don't point it at each other. We point it in a safe direction, which, again, is down or down range, wherever down range is. All right. Too many times at a gun range, I have seen people when somebody wants to get their attention, they've got the firearm in their hand with their finger still on the trigger. And as they're turning their body,
but they'll stop them. They won't get far, will they?
Not in a properly controlled range. So, but again, if you pick this firearm up, first thing you do is you get your master grip.
Right. I always get grabbing that just to give you an idea.
Your master grip means the web of your hand comes up to the tail or the dovetail of the firearm. Get that master grip. You know, you don't want to get it down here because that's not how you're going to shoot it. It's going to pop out of your hand, right? So you get that master grip. Your fingers should immediately come to the frame of the firearm. Okay? So not on the trigger. A lot of people, when they pick a gun up, automatically do this. Okay? It's just not good. So pick your firearm up here. If you have the firearm in a holster, every holster has a little area that mimics the trigger area. So when you go to that holster, if you put your finger on that area, when you pull the gun out, your gun's on the trigger. So you should train yourself to go to your holster with your finger in front of where the trigger would be. So when you pull out of that holster, your finger goes right to the frame of the firearm. So good to go?
Excellent. The other thing about a revolver is it's very hard for these things to jam, though. You got a 5 because if something doesn't work, you don't have to clear anything. You just pull it again. So it has the advantage of that. Now it has one more disadvantage in that, and you'll understand later, when you pull that trigger, all the energy of shooting that bullet goes into your hand.
That's correct.
That's why you said that lightweight one hurts so much.
That's right. When you fire a semi-auto versus a revolver, you've got a different mechanism working, right? So this revolver, all of the energy here. So when you pull the trigger here, your arm is going to raise much more than if you were firing a semi-automatic.
And they were wrong when they showed this too. In your old TV show. I'm sure someone did it, but then you're going to cross hold it and so forth. And that's the stuff you really do well with training.
That's the fine motor skills. That's when you really want to be proficient with your firearm. For a revolver, with all of that energy coming back here, earlier I said you don't want to pick it up like this and try to shoot it because that's that energy we were talking about coming back. There is a misnomer, though. You'll hear people say, well, I want a revolver versus a semi-automatic because every time I pull the trigger on a revolver, it's going to fire. It can't jam because there's no mechanism trying to feed another round. It most certainly may not fire. There's a lot of components to a bullet. There's a little thing in the back of the bullet called a primer, unless it's a rimfire. All right? You can strike that primer, and if it's a bad primer, it's not going to ignite the powder. So it's a misnomer. I don't like to hear people say, well, every time you pull the trigger on a revolver, it's going to fire.
That's a great point.
And there's another point. Once you run out of bullets,
you're done.
You keep pulling the trigger. It's not going to fire. But so that's a revolver. And then compare that to the semi-automatic. All right. Now, these molded models show a significant difference in size, but you can have very large revolvers.
Right, exactly. The Clint Eastwood.
The larger the revolver, the heavier it is. So, and I just want to, it just dawned on me when I took this out of my hand and put it here, my finger automatic, I didn't even think about it. But then when I was getting ready to say about it, I realized my finger's already there. That is just habit. It's called muscle memory. Right? There's a thing that if you do it so many times, it becomes muscle memory. I don't know how many times are, but this is what I teach in my class. Slow, methodical practice makes fast, accurate results. Right? Slow and methodical, and eventually you'll be fast and accurate. Same thing with a semi-automatic. Get your master grip. All right, finger on the frame here. Right? When you're exactly what you were saying earlier, a lot of times this is not an incorrect shooting, to hold it here, but you're more accurate to come here.
It's not as optimum with current knowledge.
Right. This is actually designed to be this way if you're holding a flashlight.
I see.
And I have seen, especially in law enforcement, some come across here with a flashlight. What's the problem with that?
It's going to take meat off your
This slide is coming back.
You're going to lose a little bit of
absolutely.
Your hand.
But because of this with the flashlight, sometimes you'll see people doing this. But to be correct, you should be here. Another thing about with muscles, okay? You don't want to squeeze this so tight that your muscle is constantly flexed. Right? Because we have slow twitch and fast twitch, right? And the fast twitch is what allows us to grip it hard. Well, the longer you do that, you start to shake, and then you lose your grip.
And accuracy, too.
And accuracy. So you want a firm grip, but not a white-knuckle grip. Okay?
Now, I remember when I was training in Aikido and doing longsword, that's the same thing they taught in longsword.
Sure.
It's like holding it, so you can't pull it out of your hand, but it's relaxed.
It's not so tight
firm.
that your muscles get tired. When you need to take the strike, you might strengthen up a little bit. But absolutely. So same thing with this. Now the difference with this and the revolver is when you pull the trigger on a semi-automatic, semi-automatic means each squeeze of the trigger, it fires one round. Automatic, or what society has deemed full auto, is when one squeeze of the trigger fires rounds until you let go of the trigger.
Which another one of the media lies at.
Absolutely. These are all full auto. No. This is semi-automatic. Pull the trigger, one round. Have to release the trigger, pull it again. Right? An automatic is pull the trigger, and as long as you're holding it and have ammo in here, it's firing. That's a misnomer. So at any rate, when you pull the trigger on a semi-automatic, the energy that is created for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The energy that is created when the powder ignites and sends the bullet out the barrel, then causes this slide to go back, and there is a recoil spring in here, so it can only go back so far. Once it's back that far, that spring that it just compressed pushes it forward again. What's happening is it pulls a bullet out of the chamber and ejects it. That's when you see the brass ping out. And the magazine, which has a spring in it, pushes another bullet up, and the slide then grabs that bullet and pushes it into the chamber. That is semi-automatic. All right, it feeds a new round in. It's not turning a cylinder like in a revolver. Why is that important? Well, in a semi-automatic, some of that energy, when I lifted your arm to demonstrate the recoil, some of that energy is absorbed in the working of this mechanism. Pushing that slide back, putting a bullet in. So your arm is going to rise less than it would in a revolver, right? Because the energy. Now, if I'm shooting a 44 Magnum revolver and a 44 Desert Eagle, right? You may not be able to tell the difference because it's such a powerful, firearm. But in an everyday average 9mm or 38 special, if you have a 357 Magnum and you're shooting 38 specials through it. So, absolutely.
Like that.
So, and then the other thing about the reloading, we talked about how long it takes to reload that. In a semi-automatic, you have magazines, right? Not clips. So, you push a button, the magazine falls out. You can grab a new magazine off your pouch or wherever and put it in there, hit the slide release lever, and you're ready to start firing again.
So there's a more rapid ability to
absolutely. There's a video out there that I think this gentleman was military and law enforcement. I don't remember for sure if he was law enforcement, but he's just standing there and he is firing it so fast. He releases the magazine and reloads it with a new magazine, and at normal video speed, you can't see it happen.
Yeah.
When they slow the speed down, you see them drop the magazine and put the new one in, and it's happening all at the same time, and it's so fast.
I've seen competitors like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've been shooting my whole life, and I can reload pretty quick, but nothing like that. So, but
now,
at any rate,
buying a gun, because this is so important. There's several things you need to be able to do. So I'm going to hold this. Look, isn't that a little cute gun? This is a typical size that often, unfortunately, a woman will get because she thinks it's cute or something. Or
she thinks
so
it's smaller. I can handle it better.
And there's some problems with this.
Sure.
You want to go ahead and talk about that?
All right. Yeah. So this small gun is lighter, okay? But when that bullet fires, that energy still has to go somewhere. Right? So because there's not as much weight in this gun or as big of a recoil spring down in here, most of that energy is now going back into the arm or the hand of the person shooting it. And the other thing about this, look at the length of the barrel. Okay?
Right.
So you've got a barrel length here, you've got a barrel length here. When you shorten the barrel length, your accuracy decreases. The longer that bullet can travel down a barrel, which is why a long rifle is more accurate than a short, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That accuracy decreases. So when she's firing, or he is firing this small gun, their accuracy is decreased. After that first shot, when they've experienced that hard recoil, now they're a little afraid of it. So that second shot isn't going to be anywhere as good.
And not only that, notice that you see how only 2 fingers are grabbing this. And you've got to, when you put that first bullet in, you have to be able to rack this thing. And that takes strength. And many people can't rack these things.
That's correct.
You know, and the rack means you're pulling it back. And then, again, we're not covering everything to guns. But the big thing is it's like a slingshot. You pull it back and let it go. And so that takes some strength.
Absolutely.
And they can't rack their
they
own
can't
firearm.
do that. Another gun manufacturer came out with a gun that it's whatever it is, easy.
Right.
Right. And that's because it's got a recoil spring that still does its job, but makes it easier, especially
and it's
for
a little
females.
Bit bigger, but not as
big as the other one. That's right. But it's easy, which means it's easier to rack that slide. So, and I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about the difference in the length of the magazine well. So on these firearms, on the semi-automatics, you have the area here, the grip. Inside that is called the magazine well. Okay, it's not called the clip well.
Right.
All right. So the shorter that is, the less grip you can get on it for accuracy and control. Now, look at me. I can only get basically one finger on there. My second finger is half off of it. Right? That's not good. Right? And even if I try to hold it, now they do make magazines for most of these guns that have finger extensions on them. Right? So you can get a little piece that allows that to grip versus this one where I can control the whole thing. I don't feel like I'm going to drop this. Right? So especially now, that could be another misnomer for women to think about, in that this is a smaller gun and easier for them to shoot. But when even women with smaller hands, typically than a male, they get this little small thing here, they're not going to be able to hold that as good. This firearm is also skinnier because it's a smaller caliber. It's a replica of a smaller caliber, so it's skinnier. So if I've got a big hand and I'm trying to get around this, I might wrap it so far that I can't actually get it to where I want it. I'll have space right here because it's not taking up my whole hand. When you're purchasing a firearm, you just simply can't do that by having seen a picture of it. You have to go and put it in your hand.
Or take the advice of somebody else, so it's a different body
type,
different strengths.
Absolutely.
That's the worst thing. It's like I was told by someone, I got to go with a friend we know's wife, and he said, I want you to save my marriage by taking my wife to the range. And I think it might have worked.
I have had couples come to my class, and the female sometimes and sometimes the male will say, well, I need you to teach me how to shoot because he just can't do it. And I understand. When you're in a relationship,
emotions and everything
else,
it's, don't try it.
Me and my wife, I might be trying to help her, but she thinks I'm being mean. Right? And so absolutely, sometimes that's the best thing you can do. Folks, get your significant other the Christmas gift of a concealed carry class or an advanced training class and make that their best Christmas ever.
That's it. That's a minimum. And I do want to say you do all of this, but you're really by appointment and so forth.
I am. I'm by appointment because I like my classes to be geared towards what the person needs.
Right, exactly.
Right? Now, I usually set up my concealed carry classes. Somebody calls and says, hey, I would like to get a concealed carry class. And I'll say, good to go. How many's in your party? And I'll explain to them that I'm happy to do it one-on-one.
Right.
If you've got a group of people, I can come to you. You can come to me.
Right.
So as you know, I just bought a large plot of land.
Yeah,
So I have a
I'm
lot
excited.
of future ideas.
Yeah, I'm
So,
excited about that. Okay, so we now, hopefully you at least have some ideas of what are the two main firearms. We aren't going to cover them all, but just the introduction. Get involved, learn something. Don't treat it like, if I don't like you, I'll get another one. Slow down a little bit and get educated. I think that's extremely important.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, most people who get a firearm for the first time and they don't like it, don't ever go back and get another one because that first one has either scared them or turned them off.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Now I want to talk about, there's some other things you need to buy when you buy a firearm.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about those. I brought some, and the first thing is what's called eyes and ears, right?
Yes.
So I'm going
Bring your eyes and ears.
Brings the eyes and ears, and we always do. I remember in the competition, these eyes and ears, and it's like everyone's double checking their stuff, and that would be getting some quality safety glasses. Now in some ranges and stuff, they'll allow these. But you may want a cap because sometimes those little things that bounce around can get caught in your shirt or something.
A lot of ranges, you're required to also wear a cap. A base with something with a build cap.
Yeah, because they have
brass.
those little walls and it can bounce off. And, you want to be unhappy, get some hot brass, jump down your shirt.
Absolutely.
I don't care who you are.
And that's what we're talking about. Not bullets ricocheting. We're talking about brass being spit out of the ejection ports of semi-automatic firearms. Hit you in the face, let a piece of glass get down between your glasses and your eyeball.
Brass, you're right.
And it's hot.
Yeah, and you'll remember. So eyes and ears,
Safety
make sure
glasses.
it's a safety one. You can get these at range. Go ahead.
I would like to say something specific because you pointed it out.
Yeah.
A lot of ranges, my glasses are certified safety lenses. Okay, when I buy them, my eye doctor makes sure, or whoever the optician is that orders the glasses, we make sure we get the safety rated ones. Okay,
Right.
the difference is that safety glasses will always have a side barrier. Okay, we don't have a side barrier here. It's not just the brass that's being expelled out. When you pull the trigger, the firing pin hits the primer ignites the powder. That powder blows out a residue. And you can smell it when you come to a range. If you can smell it, it's hitting your body. Okay? You ever hear about GSR? When somebody's in a shooting and they check GSR, gunshot residue, they can swab your hand and see if it has gunpowder residue on your hand. That can also get in your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're wearing these type of glasses, right, that don't have a side protection, you can get that powder and or the brass in there.
And the exciting thing is now you can look online and they even have one if you have the prescription where they'll design it, and it's designed for shooting.
That's right.
As well.
They also make these that are intended to go over top of your prescription glasses. So these are bigger, they're a little bulkier. And a lot of people, when I was in law enforcement and we were doing range qualifications, they didn't want to wear these over their glasses. Well, you have to. It's bulky and it feels weird on your face, but it protects you.
Right.
I would rather not lose vision in my eye or, have 3 weeks of dealing with pain in my eye because I didn't want to wear the safety glasses.
That's excellent. Now we'll talk about ears. And you can get these from probably under $25 if you want. You can
basic
get ones or basic all the way up to, these are ones that have a battery and they're designed to let you hear stuff on the range, which I really like.
I like those also.
If you can afford it, I do recommend that. And these have I carry extra set of batteries, but also it's a little thing. And then they even have ones where if you have friends, you can communicate with other people.
And one of the things about these, yes, this type can get up over $100, sometimes even a couple hundred, depending on the quality. But as that volume speaker you were pointing it out, okay, the thing I like about this, and I require my instructors, my range instructors, to have this type. Because as you're shooting, when there's not an active firing going on, you've got earmuffs on. This allows you to hear. You can hear the students talking. If somebody needs help, it actually amplifies that. And these are smart enough that once a round is fired, it closes it off before it gets to your ear. And I really like the amplified ones because for an instructor, it helps me hear what other people are doing. Now, obviously, if there's active firing going on, it's going to be muffled, so you're not going to hear anything.
Right.
But it's really, really good. And it also, I feel like it helps for anybody. If you're just going out to the range to shoot, get these, because it's going to keep you from every time you want to talk to somebody,
do something
from taking
like
them off.
Yeah.
You know, can I demonstrate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? We're at the range firing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, yeah.
And we're firing, and then all of a sudden you and I want to talk, and there's two people down here, and I do this so I can hear you talk, and then they fire their cannon down there, right? So get you a pair if you can afford it. Get you a pair that has that amplifier in there, but always wear your hearing protection. You and I both know that if you're in an active shooting situation, you're not probably going to have hearing protection, right? But save your ears. And wear hearing protection.
That's it, exactly. Yeah. So that's another one. A few other things I'm going to bring the thing over. The next thing I want to talk about, let me grab it, is a case, especially for home protection, and then understanding having something to lock it up. And a friend of mine bought a firearm, and he goes, well, you know, the grandkid almost never comes over. I went, grandkid. And I went out and bought one of these for him.
Yes.
You know, and I said, I don't care. You'll get slack. There'll be a time. The grandkid's coming, and you may not have put that up securely. So this is important to know. They have these different types. They have ones. This has a simple combination. They also have ones that are really good with different finger controls, where it's a simple combination to put on. It often will have a cable so you can put it in. You know, like
they also have one of these that has where the unlock is here. It's a little finger dial. Yeah, and you can stick your finger. Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. And those are often, if you can afford it, better, because if you have it in the house.
But again, Martin, it's muscle memory.
Yes.
This only works if you use it. Right?
Yeah.
And that is muscle memory. Come home, take your gun off, open this up and put it in it. Right? If that gun is meant to be home protection, get you one that you can open quickly.
Yep.
There is.
And then practice that.
Practice it all the time, every day. There are multiple times. There's also a true story that Mike talks about often where a gentleman's phone rang at night and it woke him up, and he reached over and he answered his gun.
Oh, God.
He literally, and it was, I believe it was a revolver, type here. He literally picked it up, put it to his head, and pulled the trigger.
Oh, God.
Right? Because his phone rang. He reached over to get his phone, but when his gun was in his hand, he's half asleep. His muscle memory was the gun's in my hand, you know, and pull the trigger.
Yeah.
He didn't have that gun in a safe position to be safe from that.
Yeah, that's why I just bought it. I said, you're not going to have this in your house without it, and make sure you have it. And they often will have a cable so you can tie it to a stud on the wall or something. So some family, kid comes in, they grab it, they can't just easily take it. So
absolutely. Again, muscle memory is key. Yep.
Next thing they're going to need is a cleaning kit. And aren't going to pull out a cold cleaning kit, but I'm going to pull out some Hoppies 9. Those that have shot before, actually, I think they like the smell of this.
Absolutely. This right here is like coffee.
Right.
This is open this up and get some Hoppies number 9. So.
But getting a cleaning kit and learning how to use it.
Absolutely.
It's an important piece. And that's the key.
Right caliber.
Right.
They make cleaning kits out there that have multiple calibers in it. So make sure but if you get a single caliber cleaning kit, don't go to the store and buy a cleaning kit and then come home and realize that wire brush won't even fit in the barrel of your gun.
And that's something else you've done with people, teaching them how to clean their firearm.
How to what we call field strip or break the firearm down, take it apart, open it up, clean it. Very important.
The next topic is choosing a holster, because, so many people have told me I spent more on holsters than I ever did firearms till I found the right one.
Absolutely.
So if you are going to carry it,
regardless of when and how you're going to carry it, if you're going to carry it for target shooting, if you're going to carry it for a sport shooting or competitive shooting, if you're going to carry it for personal self-defense, how do you want to carry it? There's a thing that, women like to carry it in their purse. All right. Do you need a holster for a gun that's in your purse?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
In fact, they're great. They've come out with so many purses now.
Yes. Concealed Cary purses, what they're called. They have holsters built into them. So the firearm is not in the main compartment with your 4,000 other things.
Yeah. So you go in there fudging around and shoot yourself in the foot or something.
Is it possible that as you're carrying that purse, your lipstick could get into the magazine or into the trigger guard and possibly squeeze the trigger? Depends on what condition the gun was put in there in. It's not completely impossible. May not be highly possible, but it's still not safe. Right? And if you're reaching in there to get the gun out and something is in the trigger well or the trigger guard,
oh God,
you could cause it to go off just trying to get it out of the gun, even though you're not actively putting your finger in the trigger. So even if you don't have a concealed carry purse, you need what's called a pocket holster. So the firearm can go into the pocket holster and into the purse. But you have to practice taking it out. Right? I teach in my concealed carry classes for women that if you've got your gun in your purse, you don't necessarily have to take the gun out to use it. If you think somebody is following you and means to do you harm, you can get your hand in your purse and get it ready to fire. And if that person runs up behind you and grabs you, fire right through the purse, right? But you've got to practice.
You got to practice and understand that.
And you talked about earlier cleaning kits, and just one thing I wanted to add to that is a cleaning mat.
Yes.
Right? So
simple thing.
Simple thing. A lot of you don't understand, people, if you haven't done it before, when you clean a firearm and you put that hoppies on there and you start breaking down all of that carbon buildup, it's going in lead. It's going when you're brushing all that clean. That's spraying it everywhere. When I clean a firearm, if I forget to, it's bad. But I put rubber gloves on, and if I forget to, now I got to scrub my hands. But it gets covered in that black soot and stuff that's coming out of there. So a nice cleaning mat, and not something the gun barely fits on, but something that as you're cleaning it, you can lay your supplies out, and when you're cleaning it, it's not getting all over.
Yeah, and also having a towel that you're using for it that you clean separate. And I like the idea. I keep a box of gloves that you'll use or something like that.
I do too. And I should buy stock in Q-tips.
Right.
But Q-tips are a gun cleaner's best friend because there's so many areas, especially inside of a semi-automatic, inside this slide that you just can't get into. Q-tips are great for that.
In cleaning oil, I'm still going to say their Militech one is my favorite. I turned you on to
You
that.
actually gave me a bottle of that, and that's really good. It's amazing that
I learned that from a veteran of all things. He said this saved our lives in Desert Storm because it infuses heat into it. But, safety, treat it like chemicals that you may want to have good ventilation. I don't know that I'd wear, fumigation stuff. I always have good ventilation in the area. And also, you really take your time. This is where a lot of stupid things occur.
Absolutely.
And John said one thing. He goes, there are no accidental discharges.
No.
There are stupid people not being safe.
Right.
And I'll never forget that. He goes, if you know your firearm and you're cleaning it, and that's why you want to learn this, you'll know if there's a problem before it occurs. And that's the level of connection you want to build with that.
Absolutely.
So that
it should
these
become
things
a
don't
part
just
of your body.
fall apart randomly.
Absolutely. When you're cleaning this firearm and you take it apart, if you're paying attention, you're going to be able to tell if a spring is stretched or broken. When you're putting it back together, you're going to be able to feel all of the internal parts as you're putting it together to make sure they're working properly. There's a lot of things. People do things almost haphazardly. Can you tear apart a gun and clean and put it back together and not even really remember seeing all the parts in there? Yes, but if you take your time and do it right and pay attention to it.
I can't because I'm slowing down and checking everything.
Absolutely, yes. So one of the other things that you want to consider when you're purchasing a semi-automatic is extra magazines. So most firearms come with one or maybe two magazines. And if you're going to do any type of sport shooting or competitive shooting, you want to have extra magazines so that you can not have to stop and reload the magazine in the middle of your shooting. So have 4 or 5. It just depends on what you're going to do, but it's something you have to consider. But it's
worth pricing in.
Absolutely.
And find out what those costs is. And we recommend kind of get an itemized cost in because you got a lot of little things to buy along with a firearm.
Especially ammunition.
Ammunition, that's right.
How expensive. I like this gun, but the ammo, 50 rounds of ammo for this gun is $80. And I like this gun too, and 50 rounds of ammo for this gun is $40.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and then there's different types of ammunition. There's the type that would be for target use.
You have hollow point. So if you see something that says jacketed hollow point, you might see JHP, jacketed hollow point. Or you might see something that says FMJ, stands for full metal jacket, which means it's not a hollow point. That's a target or practice ammunition. Hollow points are going to be more expensive. Some manufacturers of hollow points put nozzler tips in it, so you don't actually see the hollow point. There's like a little plastic thing in there, but when it hits its target, it still mushrooms out. So knockdown power for personal protection, you want a hollow point. Target shooting, you want a full metal jacket, because it's less expensive. You don't want to waste the hollow points shooting targets.
So that's another thing you're going to need to purchase, and there are a few other items we have.
Absolutely. So think about accessories. Women love to accessorize. Well, when it comes,
I've seen a lot of guys in the bat shop, but they don't call
they
it
don't
that.
call it that. But when it comes to firearms, guys love to accessorize.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So semi-automatic firearms have this little rail up here, and especially the newer ones. Some of the older ones don't. Not all of them do, but you can put things on here like laser sights.
Right.
You could put things on here like flashlights.
Right.
A lot of them come with a system up on the top of the slide that allows you to take a cap off and put on a holographic sight. So it's just a little window, but when you look through it, there's a green dot or a red dot or a target or something like that. These are accessories. More accessories would be magazine extensions. I talked about it with this smaller one earlier. You might want to put a finger extension on the magazine, or this magazine may hold 15 rounds. Maybe you want to put a magazine in that holds 20, so the magazine's going to stick out a little further. To me, that looks funny, but hey, it's an accessory that you can
like
purchase.
Competition often.
Absolutely.
They allow higher rounds.
Another thing I want to talk about ammunition is make sure you get the proper ammunition for your gun.
Right.
They're a 380 and a 9mm are the same size bullet. And a lot of people refer to the 380 as a 9mm short. Right? So will a 380 bullet fire down a 9mm gun? Yes, but the cartridge is significantly smaller. It may not make it out the barrel.
Yeah.
But you have 9x19. You have a lot of different, the same caliber, but the different markings behind that first number will tell you whether or not it's right for your gun. Like, for instance, you have a 223 rifle and you have a 5.56 rifle. Right. And everybody says it's the same. Well, a 5.56 bullet has a higher gas pressure than a 223 bullet. Right. You have to make sure your gun is chambered for whatever bullet. So make sure you get the right ammunition.
Right. No, that's absolutely correct. And you find out and learn about it. And then practice. There's some great tools out for practicing now. And one of the tools is called dry firing to start with. And that's where you make sure there's nothing around and you double check it's safe. You still are firing in a safe direction. And with a semi-automatic, you're going to be racking it, practicing and pulling it slow and getting a sight. But they're now these little bullets with lasers. So when it hits the back, it puts a little dot on it.
Shows you where you're hitting. In my classes, I teach my students that when they want to dry fire, so make the gun safe. I teach them how to do that. I'll tell you a story in a second about making the gun safe. Teach them how to do that. And I take a empty bullet case. Right. And I set it on the tip of the gun. And I get it out here. And this is double action firing. Right. So I put my finger in and I'm looking and I am squeezing that trigger and I'm forcing that hammer to come back. And then you hear the click and the hammer comes forward and the bullet stays on the gun. Now, I carry a Sig Sauer, which has a arced slide. It's not a huge arc, but that shell setting up there is constantly wobbling because it's not flat. A Glock is flat, so it's easier, right? But I'll pull that trigger several times and not drop that shell off of there. That is excellent dry fire practice because it teaches you to hold that gun still. Right. Not just squeeze the trigger. And that's another thing we have. Squeeze the trigger, don't jerk the trigger. Yeah.
Well, someone said there are two core fears we have is fear of falling and loud noises we're born with. And so you have to muscle memory train yourself to overcome a primal fear.
Absolutely.
With a fire. And I got to tell you, every time I go in the range, still the first time, it's like
it's like that scared.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I teach in my classes. A lot of times we have what's called recoil flinch.
Right.
So they'll be ready to fire and they do this.
Yep.
They're pulling the trigger and they do this because they're trying to fight the recoil.
Yep.
So I said, and you hit on it earlier.
Or anticipate. They're afraid of that.
Anticipate, that's right. So you hit on it earlier. When
Yeah.
you pull the slide back, let it go.
Yeah.
Don't ride the slide. Don't
Right.
pull the slide back and ride it
Right.
home,
Yeah.
because the energy that it takes to seat that bullet
Yeah.
into the chamber, you might deaden that. The slide might come
And it'll
forward
jam.
and then it jams.
Yeah.
So I tell people, I take my firearms and I pull the slide back and I let it go and I'm as
Yeah.
hard as I can. And I
Right.
say, every time you pull the trigger, that thing's going to go back as hard as it can
Yeah.
until it's forced to stop, and then it's going to slam forward.
Yeah.
So don't try to fight it. Just let it happen.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to do this.
Yeah.
So I get them squeeze,
And surprise you.
and bang, it goes off, and they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah.
That's the best shot to take.
No, that's excellent. So understanding that and learning to work with it are excellent. Well, there was also another kit you recommended for practicing.
That was the Mantis X.
Mantis X.
Yeah, we see those. I think they have some Facebook commercials or whatever, but I hear about them on the radio all the time. Mantis X, our military even uses it for training.
Mm-hmm.
Mantis X, our military even uses that for training. It's a system that goes into the chamber, and as you pull the trigger, it sends information to your phone or whatever device you have it linked to, and says whether you had the recoil flinch, if you're pointed at a target that you got it connected to, where you would have hit. Actually, I even think it can tell your breathing, whether or not your breathing is accurate, just based on the rise and fall of your hand.
Right.
It's amazing all the technology that went into this system.
Yeah, I really want to say this is a skill you have to take some time to learn.
And you have to be serious with it.
And you have to be serious. And that's why we're not an advocate everyone should do this.
Absolutely.
You need to set aside time. And it was explained to me it's a perishable skill. I mean, it's not so perishable you won't know how to safety and pick up, but you need to set regular intervals of practice. And, one of the things that John showed me is I want you to just load 3 bullets in. Take your time and slowly notice what happens.
Right. Pay attention
you might bring the target back in. And if you spend an hour, you aren't going to shoot as many, but your goal is to get better each time.
Every time. So as I grew up, we shot a combat course. So, big firearms, 9mm, 45s, 40s. We also shot 22 silhouettes. So the smaller the caliber, the less recoil it's going to have. Okay. I was proficient with it. I was used to it. I joined the Marine Corps. I shot a lot. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went into the police academy. During firearms qualification in the police academy, I was on the far right end, which is the worst place to be because you're getting all the brass coming this way, right? But I was on the far right end, and after about the 3rd time, the instructor stopped coming down to look at my target. So we're firing from the 25-yard line to the 15-yard line, and I had a hole in my target about this big, right in the center of the target.
Right.
And you're shooting at a silhouette of a person, right? And every single shot I took, I just was eating away at the middle. Yeah. And he quit coming down and looking. But I can tell you today, after I had been a career in law enforcement, where I really didn't have time to go out, I wasn't active in the shooting sports around the Raleigh area. There's not a lot.
Just working so much. Yeah.
Working days, nights. It took a lot out of me. So the only time I went to the range was during range qualification. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point now where I still shoot 100% every time I fire and do qualification. Right. But I'm no longer shooting a group like this with 50 rounds.
Right.
They're now spread out like this.
Yep.
You said it's a perishable skill. It really is. I can still go shoot 100%, but it's not as good of 100% as it used to be when I was doing it all the time.
And that's called the grouping too.
Absolutely.
That's another term, what we're going for. And then when you work with a good teacher, wherever it goes off shows you how you're overcompensating.
Correct.
So, that's important.
Quick, I fired a shotgun in qualifications and I failed.
Oh.
First time I ever failed. And so I went over to the instructor and I said, can you help me, give me some pointers, since I've never shot this bad in my life.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And he goes, well, let me get, and he mentioned another person to come out and shoot it. Yeah. And I said, I'm not saying there's something wrong with the shotgun. I'm sure it's me. Mm-hmm. Well, he had the other person come out and shoot it, and he failed. They found out that the tube on the shotgun was, when they tore it apart, the tube was bent. So even though my sights looked like I was aiming here, it was actually firing over here. So it really was the gun. But the point is that, yes, you can have a firearm that it is the firearm and not the shooter.
Yeah, that's right. I do think most of the time it's isolated between the back of the gun and the floor, which is there's a disconnect, if you will,
from here to here,
Right,
right?
yeah.
You know, something's not happening. One of the other things I think that we should cover is that when you're deciding whether or not you want to buy a firearm, you also need to consider, are you willing to teach your family members
Yes.
about the firearm?
Yes.
If you want a firearm, that means that your kids now may have access to it.
Yes.
Your spouse may have access to
Yeah.
it. It's not just for you. You have
Yeah.
to consider your whole family. In our country, you are legally required to keep your firearms safe from children.
Yep.
There are two laws that
Form
govern.
every time someone buys a firearm.
Absolutely. There are two laws that govern keeping a firearm safe. One of them covers from age 12 to 17, and one of them covers below the age of 12, whether or not you're doing it correctly and could be charged with a crime.
No, that's fantastic. In fact, one of my friends, she wanted everyone in the family to get basic
To go to the
firearm. And one daughter said, I don't want it. She said to her daughter, you don't have to go do anything, but just take the safety.
Absolutely.
And you know, she came to her mom, says, I don't want to shoot again. I'm grateful I did.
I have a good friend I met through the concealed carry. Most of my concead carry is word of mouth.
Right.
Not to boast, but people tell me that I'm a great instructor.
Yeah, you are a great instructor.
So
and funny too.
I had a gentleman come and take the class, and he asked me if his two sons could come and take the class. And I said, absolutely. And he goes, well, you know, they're only, and I think they were 15 and 17 or whatever. And I said, well, they can come take the class, but they can't get a concealed carry permit until they turn 21.
Right, sure.
And he said, well, I want them to take the class so that they get the same instruction and understanding that I had and that they know. And that was amazing. And he paid for those two of his kids to take the class just to have that training. And I thought to myself, that is a responsible gun owner.
Yep.
So another misnomer that I think the news media lets out.
Many.
You have to remember.
Keep blowing up. Yeah.
You only have to be 18 to possess a handgun, right? But how old do you have to be to buy it? 21. Can't buy a handgun unless you're 21.
Right.
But if I'm a father of a 18, 19, 20-year-old, I can let them take my handgun to the range.
Right.
They can open carry it. We have a lot of 18-year-olds in this state that open carry with handguns.
Right.
And unfortunately, police don't always know those laws.
Right.
Right. I have dealt with police officers myself with the concealed carry laws that were trying to arrest somebody for a crime that person hadn't committed because the police officer wasn't knowledgeable on the law.
Yeah.
So it's just
get the right training. Now, the next one is dominant eye, because that's something you need to know about with firearms. And
absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that. And this is something you always do in all the classes. You know, if you notice often you're going to be looking usually through one eye.
Right.
And if you're right-handed, it's nice if you're right eye dominant, which means it's the eye your brain kind of uses as a primary reference, but it's not always so. So you want to know what those are.
Right. So the human brain doesn't receive information from both eyes at the same time. One eye is always going to get priority in your brain over the other eye, and that is called your dominant eye. Most people don't actually know which is their dominant eye. We can't tell when we're looking at something which eye is transmitting information to the brain first. So how can you tell what your dominant eye is? Well, there's several different ways, but I like to use a method, and as you know, I do it in my classes. So keeping both eyes open, you take your hands and you make a little hole right there.
Right.
You keep both eyes open. You pick a spot. Keeping both eyes open, you look at that spot, and you're looking at it through that hole.
Yeah.
And with both eyes open, you slowly bring your hands back into your face. And whatever eye you're looking through, which me is my right eye, is your dominant eye. Your brain is going to bring your hand back to whatever your dominant eye is, and
just so
you don't even realize it.
Because another one I had learned was, you close one eye
and that's what I was going to say. You can put it out there, find that spot. If I close my left eye, I'm looking at it. If I close my right eye, I see the back of my hand.
Right.
You can do it with a thumb. Put your thumb up there.
Yeah.
Close your left, close your right. For me, because I'm so used to it, I'm going to either side, but it's got to, it's really neat. The problem comes in, as you mentioned, if I'm right-handed and I am left eye dominant, that's going to affect how I aim my firearm, especially a handgun where my sights are only this far apart.
Right.
say with a rifle, your sights are further apart. So you're more accurate. Okay. But when you got sights like this, if I'm left eye dominant and I'm right-handed and I don't realize that, right, and I close my right eye and I'm looking through the sights with my left hand, I'm going to shoot to the left. Right? It's because what happens is I'm pushing the gun over to line up with my left eye. Right? So I'm pushing the gun to the left. But because of the angle across, it doesn't look like much, but because of the angle from my left to my right, I think I'm lined up straight on the target when I'm not. I'm actually aimed up left. If I'm left-handed and I'm right eye dominant and I come up with my gun here, what I do is I say the person who's right eye dominant, cross eye dominant is what we call it. They're going to turn the back of the gun so that it lines up with my right eye. Well, when I turn the back of the gun, I'm aiming left. But my eye thinks I'm aiming straight. So whether you're right eye dominant and left-handed or whether you're left eye dominant and right-handed, if you don't know and correct that, you're going to shoot left. Yep. It's a matter of physics in the way you compensate for that dominance.
Yeah, and you have to practice how to use that as well.
And so once you know that's a problem that you have to learn to force yourself to close your left eye, even though you're left eye dominant, because then your brain is forced to take information from your right eye, or you have to teach yourself to shoot left-handed. So there are several things you can do. My father was blind in his right eye, okay? But he was right-handed. So every time he shot, and he knew it, he would lay his head over. So he kept his sights aligned straight, and he would lay his head over and use his left eye to shoot because he was right-handed.
Stance. And I don't want to demonstrate here, but stance is another important thing, is getting a good stance when you're firing. And that's, you want a solid stance leaning into it versus like this.
So many times you see people when they're ready to shoot, they're leaned way back, and why do they do that?
Well, I think they're afraid of the bang.
I think they're trying to get the gun away from them, right? Yeah, But the proper stance is leaning into it, a little squat in the knees. I prefer a modified weaver, so my feet are staggered and slightly canted.
And that's some people like square off.
Some people like that isosceles.
For the keto training, that's why I like
squared off.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not squared off?
No, we were always taught.
Okay, yeah. So, I studied Okinawan
Jiu-jitsu? Kempo,
Kempo,
Well, there's a lot of
similarities. I had the jiu-jitsu in my head. I studied Okinawan Kempo when I was young. I don't remember how our katas were always squared forward. But at any rate, whatever that stance is, do it the same every time. But here's what you shouldn't do, okay? If you're shooting right-handed, you should not have your right foot in front of your left foot, okay? You need to be whatever hand you're shooting with, that needs to be the foot that's further back if you're going to shoot with a staggered stance. A lot of times I have students in my class who come up and they do a staggered stance with their right foot forward. It's all about the dominancy and the twist of the body, right? If I'm putting my right hand out here straighter, I need that left foot back here to offset that forward push. So there's a lot to it. Like I said, we're not going to cover that here, but make sure that you have a comfortable stance.
The next thing is going to the range the first time. I really want to tell you, because I've gotten to go with different people. It's a little intimidating.
Absolutely.
And it's a little scary, and there are a lot of rules there. And, the great thing is good ranges, tell them it's the first time. And what you want to learn is listen to the range officers.
Absolutely.
And if for God forbid you're sensitive of being corrected, get over it. Now that's why women learn so much faster, because they're often more receptive to learning without the ego.
Because they accept that they don't know what's going on. Whereas men want to, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so, when you go to the range the first time, follow the instructions. And the big thing is, that's why we like these, where you have the sounds. Make sure you got eyes and ears. Usually there'll be double doors.
And you also need to be prepared that a lot of ranges make you get ammunition at their range.
Yes.
Because people reload ammunition and it's not always safely done.
Right.
So be prepared when you go to a range. Have some money available.
Yeah.
If that range requires you to buy ammunition there, be prepared for that.
Oh, we got to stop and talk about, don't buy that cheap Wolf,
Wolf,
whatever. Oh God,
Berdan primed ammo.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, basically here's the idea. If you take your bullet and you take a magnet and it sticks, there's no
that's a
indoor
steel
range that's
casing.
going to let you have it.
Yeah.
You just wasted your money
Yeah.
unless you live out in the country and you have property and you don't care. So
Yes.
making sure you learn that and don't just buy the cheapest stuff. But you're right, many ranges. And also it's because part of their profit is by recovering the brass, so they
Sure.
don't want it mixed with other things.
Yep.
That's a great one. So when you go there, you want to have your eyes and ears, or you get it from them or rent them. And then when you get to the range, it's very important. I say make sure all your firearms are pointing in the same direction in the bag. You know which direction. In fact, when I started, I'd put a line pointing which way to put them in the bag, because some ranges require the Virginia NRA range. You're supposed to go up to the range all facing down range.
Okay.
In the bag.
And that's a great practice. Also understand every range I've ever been to requires that the firearm be unloaded prior to entering the building or the line. So just if you carry a firearm loaded for concealed carry or whatever, that's one thing. But if you're going to a range, you have to have your firearms unloaded.
Yep.
I don't know I don't know of any range that has the no concealed carry, but they probably have something up that says unload all firearms.
Yeah.
That's where live firing is going on. So you don't want to take the chance that accidents happen. So just be prepared for that.
So that's it. And then also learning how to put it on the table, only putting the ammo for that gun, lay it all out in front. If you have a semi-automatic, you want to rack it so it's open so they can see it.
And I was going to tell you, when
you want to have that open so they could look over your shoulder and say, oh, that's pointing down range.
Absolutely. So a semi-automatic, the proper way to have it lying on a shooting bench or lying on the table if you're at the range is with the magazine out and the ejection port pointing up.
Yep, and it's back. So
the slide lock
to the
slide lock to the rear and the ejection port pointing up. The reason for that is so that a range officer or anybody can walk by and look through that and see that it's unloaded. I mentioned earlier visually and physically inspecting the firearm. It is not proper to do this and say it's unloaded, right? There is a good video out there of an ATF agent or an FBI agent that shoots himself in the foot because he's like, this is unloaded. He goes is this unloaded? And then he shoots himself in the foot. Yeah. Physically inspecting it means sticking your finger down in there and feeling the chamber. You're either going to feel there's a hole or you're going to feel the flat part of the shell casing, right? You'll know right away. And the other thing is looking down the magazine well, I see a magazine's not in there, but when I am doing it, I take my pinky and stick it right up the magazine well.
So you can see it.
Yeah, you see it and feel it. With a revolver, as you mentioned, the cylinder needs to be rotated out and laying up. So a cylinder, whether it goes out to the right or to the left, is going to then sit in an up position. So whichever way it is, that needs to be up on the table. First of all, you don't want to scratch up the cylinder. You don't want to damage it or whatever. But also, if it's open and laying down, I can't walk by and see that there's nothing in the cylinder.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and don't do things like slap it in. Put it in.
Right. You'll see like in movies and stuff where they do this and slap it in.
Pretty much everything in the movie is
wrong.
Yeah, just to know. So that's to understand, get the experience, possibly having someone you're real comfortable with that will go with you. You can share lanes at a lot of places, but make sure it's someone you're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
And here's a hint. It's often not your partner. Right. To go with.
You asked me to think about some dumb things that people do with firearms.
Yes.
So, along with slapping that cylinder in, that you see them and they do that, and they put one bullet in, and they're doing that Russian roulette and stuff. So, some stupid things that I see people do, and we talked about it earlier, is carrying it in your pocket or in your purse or bag or whatever without a pocket holster.
Yep.
That's dumb.
Yeah, here's an example of one designed for a bucket.
Absolutely. So the firearm will go.
Here, go ahead, try this. It's for a revolver.
It's for a revolver. So it goes in there, and then that whole thing goes into your pocket.
Right.
And some pocket holsters have some Velcro type stuff on here so that
make it sticky
in the pocket, right? But this one looks like it's got this curved part here to help hold it in the pocket. So when you go in and you're pulling it out of the pocket, this stays in the pocket. And you should practice that. But what you don't want is you don't want it in your pocket like this. say you're like most people and you got change in your pocket or keys or something, and you're sticking your hand in there and it gets all tangled up, and you just don't want accidents. And there's no reason not to have a nice pocket holster. So.
Yeah, no, that's it. Excellent.
Women throwing them in a purse. The biggest thing, Martin, that I see, the biggest dumb thing that I see people doing, or that I hear about people doing, is, let's say they like to carry their firearm concealed in their vehicle, center console, or a magnet under the dash, or the door pocket, or whatever. And they get out of their car at night and they go to bed and they leave the firearm in their car. If you knew how many reports over the years I took of being in motor vehicles and one of the items listed that got going was a firearm. Yep. I've known law enforcement officers that leave their badge in their personal car, their wallet or whatever. Somebody breaks in there and gets that. So don't leave your firearm, folks. If you're going to carry your firearm, let's say you're carrying it on your person, but you're going to go in somewhere that says you can't have it in there and you stick it in your console. It's not normally there, and you might forget it's in there. Just take your firearm out of your car.
Yeah. Well, I know someone who does training where they go to locations they can't have it, so they stop ahead of time. They go in the trunk. They put in a locked units. So there's no way they can get that.
Absolutely.
And then also learn the laws of going to the range and stuff as well. You want to have that inaccessible. Don't just put in the seat or something.
Absolutely.
That's an advantage of having a concealed carry instruction. So,
absolutely. And the good thing about that, let's talk about children.
Yeah.
If you have a North Carolina Concealed Carry Permit and you have to go to school for a parent-teacher conference, or to pick up your child, or say you drop your kid off or pick your kid up in carpool or whatever, North Carolina state law does not allow anybody to carry a firearm onto school property.
Right.
The only exception is if you have a valid concealed carry permit, you can now carry your firearm onto the school property, as long as it stays in a closed compartment or container within a locked vehicle, or in a locked container securely affixed to the vehicle.
Which would mean like in the trunk,
the glove box somewhere.
It cannot easily be accessed.
Right. The other thing that is great about our law is, for carpool purposes, the parent isn't getting out of the car.
Right.
Well, under the old law, if you had a firearm on your person and you were going to pick up your kid, you had to take the firearm off of your person and put it in a closed compartment or container before you got into the school property. Well, there was an incident in North Carolina years ago where a person did that. The person in the car behind them saw them, called 911, and it was a disaster because he was obeying the law. Well, they've now made the law so that if you have a concealed carry permit and you are not getting out of the car, you can still have it on your body, as long as you only unlock the door when the person is getting in or out of the car, and then you relock the doors. So something I think is important.
Well, this is also why you want to get from a good trainer.
Absolutely. And why I think, if you're going to carry a firearm and you say, well, I don't need a concealed carry permit, think about this. If you have to store that gun somewhere in the car, close it up, and then you forget about it because you're busy with the day's activities, and then you come up to a traffic checkpoint or get pulled over for some odd reason, and now all of a sudden, oh no, I've got my gun in the glove box and I don't have a concealed carry permit.
Right.
So get your concealed carry permit.
That's right.
And it also makes it easier to purchase a handgun.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, that's another advantage. It's just having that. There's so much we can cover. I think we're gonna have to do another show. I want to cover safety in the home and everything else.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. We, home defense and personal protection. That I think that would be a great show.
Yeah. We're gonna do a part 2. But I just want to end with advice for someone who has their concealed carry and making an officer feel safe, because I was really nervous the first time I got pulled over. I went rolling through a stop sign, okay? And the guy pulled me over, and, I went, I'm stupid, I did it. But, I'm thinking what I was taught and where to put my hands. Just talk about a little bit about that, because this is good advice for anybody.
Absolutely.
When an officer comes up,
whether they have
do not have an argument there with a police officer. That's what your courts later are.
Absolutely. So, as a law enforcement officer, having stopped who knows how many vehicles, some with, some without concealed carry permits, when I run somebody's license plate, it also runs the first registered owner's driver's license. If that person has a concealed carry permit, I get notified.
Yeah.
So, I may or may not know if the person driving the car is the driver, but I will know that the registered owner has a concealed carry permit.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of help.
Yeah.
So what can you do to make an officer safer or more
Right.
comfortable, and yourself as well. If you have a concealed carry permit, if you have a good instructor that taught you that class, they will have taught you, do not do anything except put your hands on the wheel
Yep.
when you get pulled over. Do not try to retrieve your driver's license.
Right.
Do not try to retrieve your concealed carry permit. Do not try to retrieve your registration card.
Right.
Put your hands on the steering wheel. If it's at night, turn the light on inside the car,
Yep.
and of course, roll the window down.
Yep.
Okay? Just do that and wait for the officer to get up there. When the officer gets up to the car and says, I'm Officer so-and-so with whatever department, I need your driver's license and registration. You are required by law, if you have a concealed carry permit and you are carrying at that time, to tell the officer, and you should, regardless, say, yes, sir, before I do anything, I want to let you know I have a concealed carry permit. The gun is located on my hip, in my glove box, wherever, and my registration is here.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can simply say, what would you like me to do?
Yeah.
Right? Let them know up front. If you are not carrying, by law, you do not have to tell the officer that you have a concealed carry permit, but you should.
Yeah.
Even if you're not the registered owner of the
Gotcha.
car when he or she runs your driver's license, and it gives them a chance to know, here's somebody who's gone through an FBI and local background check. They're fingerprinted. They're probably not a bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay. When I was teaching officers at the academy, I said, officers have the perception of being pricks, right? Because we walk up to cars and we're like, I need your driver's license, registration. You got anything here you shouldn't have? So we can approach every car like they're a good guy or like they're trying to hurt us until we know they're not trying to hurt us.
Yeah.
So if you give them that information up front, that helps them. So once the officer says, once you told the officer, I have a North Carolina concealed carry permit, I am carrying, the gun is on my hip, my wallet is in the console, my registration is in the glove box.
Yeah.
And the officer, if it's a, calm situation, will say, that's fine, go ahead and retrieve your driver's license, concealed carry permit, and your registration card.
Yeah. In fact, one gentleman told me that he's pulled over and he said, he had his firearm on the right side. He said, officer, I'd like you to make sure to see it first.
Right.
So
absolutely.
he moved in a way. Do you see that?
Yep.
And then the officers always has a light or something and shined it and so forth. And this is good advice, even if you don't. But the thing that I want to just say is, if I were a police officer and I pulled over and someone had that, I go, this guy's fingerprinted. He's tagged and tagged. His criminal days are ruined.
Not going to be a criminal.
And all police are different, but many of them that I've talked to informally, they go, I actually feel a little safer when I go up to that because I know that the person's not going to do something stupid.
I want everybody, even good people, have bad days.
Yeah.
Right. So just because that person is somebody we think is a good person doesn't mean they're not going to be having a bad day. But I want to share this as a safety point for anybody that might be watching this.
Yeah.
Okay. If you have an officer who, when you tell them you have a gun in the car, says something like, do you mind if I hold on to that for mine and your safety? I'll give it back to you at the end of the traffic stop. If you choose to let the officer have the firearm, if that officer says, you mind handing me that gun, I'll give it back to you when I'm done. My strong suggestion, being a retired law enforcement officer and being a concealed carry instructor, my strong suggestion is that you say, if you are okay with them having the firearm, because you don't have to give it to them, but if you're okay with it, my strong suggestion is that you say, Officer so-and-so, I don't mind if you hold on to the firearm during the traffic stop, but I will step out of the car and let you retrieve it.
That's excellent. We're going to end on that note.
So you don't want to be the one who grabs the gun and does this because you don't properly handle firearms and his partner's walking up at that time.
I think that's a good ending note. So we'll give some information on finding out about you as well. I want to come back and talk about home safety, awareness, and a whole bunch of other things.
Sure.
We'll have a part 2 that's definitely coming down. This was terrific. Thanks so much. I always enjoy volunteering and helping with you. I'm such an advocate. There's so many firearms in our society that I hope if you found this useful, share this with people.
Absolutely.
Because education, remember, we want to move from either infatuation or fear to respect.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. And we all should be looking out for each other. and make it a safer idea, and really support the legal and responsible use of firearms, and start noticing your media is misinforming you, and your politicians probably as well.
Absolutely.
So get some education from someone like yourself that actually knows what's going on, and make your family safe by having the education.
And remember, every gun is always loaded. Finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. Point your gun in a safe direction. Be sure of your target and what's around it.
Excellent. Thanks, JD. This
Thank
was
you.
terrific.